couple of years ago, Guntik and I decided that should any celebrity or person of note anyway pass away, that we were going to abstain from any form of commemoration video or anything like that. We did make an exception. We said if it was a particularly momentous death, then we might acknowledge it. And at the time of recording this, not but an hour ago or so, the news trickled down to my cavern here that Roger Corman had passed away. And granted, the man was 98 years old. If you kept track of him, you were expecting it at any turn of the corner. But, you know, he's almost one of those titanic figures that you think he's always going to be there in the background, you know, pulling at the strings. And true to his style, he was churning out works to the end of his days. So, yeah, man. If you don't know who Roger Corman is, then I question your love of film, man. It's not so much that he made classics. It's just he enabled so many people to get a foot in the door, and a lot of those people went on to become humongous names. You know, Joe Dante, James Cameron, Francis Ford Coppola, Ron Howard, Scorsese. Fucking in terms of actors, Jack Nicholson, De Niro. You know, there was just so many people that this guy saw and put at the center of attention, gave an opportunity to, that went on to learn from his very distinct style of filmmaking, to learn a lot in a little time, to go on to do bigger things within the system. And that's the thing about Roger Corman. He was a man that worked outside the system, but made the system work for himself. And that too, I think, needs to be admired, man. This guy, let's face it, as a producer mostly, he was out to make a buck. But there was a particular charm to his kind of exploitative way to use people of talent to get projects out. Yes, he would cut corners like no other. Yes, he would have movies turn around within days sometimes, you know. And, you know, the costs to the quality of the creation were a multitude. But this dude, you know, he churned out so much stuff that inevitably there had to be stuff in there that people just loved. And of course, there's always the love for culty B to Z grade cinema that permeates any film lover's lifetime, man. So he provided a lot of that stuff. And people tend to forget that because he provided so much slush, you know, of a varying quality, that, you know, there was a period of time there where he did direct a lot of stuff and produce some, I mean, just super memorable movies. Most notably for me, and how I got to know Roger Corman was, you know, his Poe cycle, where he directed and produced a lot of Edgar Allan Poe based, very loosely based, mind you, most of the time, works. And a lot of those with Vincent Price. You know, he wasn't how I got to know Vincent Price, but he was, when I knew Vincent Price, when I got to know Vincent Price, Roger Corman films with Vincent Price were some of the first ones that I consumed and fell in love with, you know. And I'll go to my grave defending movies like Mask of the Red Death as masterpieces. And that was Corman, man, directing, producing. You know, Corman is kind of renowned, again, not only for B movies and stuff like that, but for being like kind of the king of the knockoffs. You know, whenever there was something big like Star Wars or Alien, most notably, he would churn out not one, but like a quadrillion freaking knockoffs. But the interesting thing about his knockoffs were that they weren't like, you know, The Asylum, where you're like, oh, that's a knockoff of that, and then that's it. It was always some unique angle to his ilk of knockoffs, and they were seedy and, you know, just kind of like grimy, very heavy on the effects despite the very constrained budgets. So there was always something interesting, even when they were heavily flawed. And granted, this kind of became less of a thing, the longer he produced. And in all honesty, I fell off the Corman train about the 90s, like the mid 90s, and didn't really keep up with much of what he was producing. I'm sure there's an entire generation of people that, grew up with those films, but my Corman era was largely seeing the stuff pre the mid 90s. And but I'll always have an appreciation for that stuff. And I'm glad that he got to go away from this mortal coil, knowing that a lot of the people that he gave a hand into the industry were very appreciative of his role in their careers, And even though working under Corman meant working fast, furious, on the cheap, and likely super exploited, these people learned a lot and ultimately learned to appreciate the man. And many of them voiced it to him long before he passed. And that's a good way to go, man. If you knew that you did a lot for this industry, for the people within it, and that they didn't hate you for it, a la Weinstein or something. Kudos, But anyway, Roger Corman, a definitive legend, a titan in his industry, and a man worthy of remembering, if not for the bulk of his works, for the massive print that he left on film history, for the way that he worked, for the way that he revolutionized things, in a lot of ways. Beyond what I mentioned, this guy was, one of those producers that would import films that, had it not been for that, we would have never gotten to see some of these foreign films until way, 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 way later. So, blazed some ground there. He was also one of those fellows that made sure that theaters understood that there was something else besides Hollywood that would put butts in seats, And Corman's, grungy little classics, they brought people, Say what you will about the quality of them, but they brought them in droves. And that was important for independent cinema, for theaters to know that there was something outside of the system that could make them money, that could have mass appeal without, the expenditure and, the grasp of Hollywood. The big strides there. So, anyway, I've spoken enough. The man, it's sad, it's sad because, like I said, man, he's one of those guys you expect to always be there. Even though he was like almost 100, it just felt like that guy was always going to be around. The Stan Lee kind of vibe to him in terms of, Stan Lee to comics, Roger Corman to movies, kind of that same vibe. But anyway, that's all I'll say about the man. I hope he says hello to Vincent Price up there. Maybe they give a little hug to each other there in heaven. Anyway, I'm out.